The city of Zarion stretched wide under the glow of two suns. Towers of glass and silver reached toward the sky, their tips shining like burning stars. Strange flying crafts moved between the towers, leaving trails of blue fire behind them. The streets below were alive with sound, voices in alien tongues, the humming of machines, and the constant marching of armored guards. In the middle of this alien city, a single human walked. His name was Daniel. His clothes were dusty, his boots cracked from long travel, and his face carried the tiredness of many lonely nights. He was far from Earth, far from anything familiar, but he kept moving. He had survived battles, storms, and endless wandering. He had no reason to stop until he heard a scream. It was sharp, cutting through the noise of the crowd. Daniel turned. His eyes searched the street and then locked on a small figure. An alien girl, no older than 12, was trapped inside a glowing net of energy. The net crackled with blue sparks, tightening around her as if it wanted to crush the life out of her. She cried out for help, but the crowd only watched in silence. Daniel's heart raced. He had seen fear before, but this was different. She was helpless. He looked around. No one moved. No one dared. The guards stood nearby, their eyes cold, their weapons ready, but they did nothing. Daniel clenched his fists. He could walk away. He could stay silent like the others, but something inside him refused. His voice whispered, "If not me, then who?" He stepped forward. The crowd gasped as the human moved toward the net. The girl's wide eyes filled with hope. Daniel crouched near the glowing trap. The energy hissed like fire, but he ignored the pain as he reached out. His hands burned, skin blistering, but he pulled with all his strength. The net resisted, shaking violently, sending sparks across his arms. The guards shouted warnings. "Stop! Step away!" Their voices were filled with anger. Daniel gritted his teeth. He had fought storms on ruined worlds, climbed mountains that tore the air from his lungs, and faced beasts with teeth like blades. He would not give up now. With one last roar, he tore the net apart. The energy exploded in a flash of light, throwing him backward. The girl fell to the ground, coughing, free at last. Daniel quickly pushed himself up, ignoring the pain in his burned hands, and pulled her to her feet. "Run," he said softly. But she did not run. She only stared at him, her eyes full of shock and wonder. The silence broke. The crowd whispered in fear. The guards stormed forward, weapons raised. The sound of metal boots echoed through the street. Daniel shielded the girl behind him, but he knew this was no simple rescue. A guard pointed at him. "Human, you have broken the law of chains." Daniel's eyes narrowed. Law of chains? He had no idea what that meant. The guards surrounded him, their weapons humming with deadly energy. The girl cried out, "No! He saved me! He saved me!" But no one listened. Daniel stood tall. His burned hands shook, but his spirit did not. He looked down at the girl, then back at the soldiers. He had no weapon, no allies, only courage. The captain of the guard stepped forward, his silver armor shining in the sunlight. His voice was deep and merciless, for touching her life, for breaking the law. "You are under arrest." The crowd gasped again. Daniel was grabbed, his arms pulled behind his back, chains of glowing steel locking around his wrists. The girl tried to push through the guards, but one soldier stopped her. She shouted, her voice breaking, "He saved me." "You cannot take him." Daniel met her eyes. For a moment, the noise of the city disappeared. He saw the gratitude, the fear, and the promise in her gaze. She wanted to help, but she was only a child. As the guards dragged him away, Daniel did not resist. His body ached, but his mind stayed sharp. Something was wrong in this world. Saving a life should never be a crime. And yet, in this city it was. The crowd parted as the guards pulled him toward the prison gates. The alien girl stood frozen, tears on her face, watching the man who had saved her vanish into the shadows of captivity. Daniel's last thought before the gates closed behind him was simple but heavy. What kind of world have I stepped into? And the girl, left in the open street, whispered to herself, "I will not let them take you forever." The iron doors slammed shut behind Daniel, and the sound echoed like thunder through the cold corridors. The light of the two suns faded, leaving him inside a place where shadows ruled. The air smelled of rust, oil, and something bitter like burnt stone. His wrists ached under the weight of glowing chains. Each step forward felt heavy, as if the prison itself wanted to swallow him. The guards pushed him into a small cell. Its walls were not stone, but shifting metal. alive with faint lines of energy crawling across the surface. It was like standing inside the belly of a machine. A narrow bed of steel rested against the wall, and above it, a single dim light pulsed almost like a heartbeat. Daniel stumbled onto the bed, the chain still clamped around his wrists. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. Silence followed. For a long time he said nothing. He only breathed slow and steady, listening to the faint humming of the prison walls. His hands still burned from the energy net, the skin cracked and raw. He looked down at them, remembering the girl's frightened eyes. That small face gave him strength, but also a heavy question. Why did saving her make him a criminal? The silence broke when two voices whispered outside his cell. Is he dangerous? One asked. He is human, the other replied, the words carrying weight like a curse. That is dangerous enough, Daniel frowned. He leaned closer to the wall, trying to catch more, but the voices drifted away. Their footsteps echoed down the hall until nothing was left. Alone again, Daniel lay back on the steel bed. The ceiling above him glowed faintly, and for a moment he thought of Earth. Its blue skies, its oceans, its freedom. That world felt like a dream now, far beyond reach. Hours passed. He did not know if it was day or night anymore, only that the prison had no mercy for time. Suddenly the silence shattered. The wall of his cell shifted, opening a thin square window. On the other side stood a figure dressed in white robes. An elder alien with pale skin and glowing eyes stared at him. The elder's voice was calm but sharp. You are Daniel, he said. Daniel sat up. Yes, who are you?
I am Keeper Maleth.
My duty is to watch over this prison. And you? The elder paused, eyes narrowing. You are a danger to our city. Daniel shook his head. I saved a child. That's all. Since when is saving a life a crime? The elder studied him in silence, then spoke with slow words. The law of chains exists for a reason. Long ago, humans broke bonds that should never have been broken. You bring chaos where there must be order. Daniel stood, pulling against his glowing chains. Order? That girl would have died. If that is your order, it deserves to be broken. For the first time, Maleth's calm mask cracked. His voice turned colder. You speak like the old ones. This is why humans were banished. This is why your kind must never rise again. Before Daniel could reply, the window closed, leaving him once more in silence. He sank back onto the bed, thoughts racing. Banished, old ones? What history was buried here? What truth had they locked away? The hours dragged on. Food arrived through a slot in the door. Strange gray blocks that tasted of metal. Daniel forced himself to eat, knowing strength was his only weapon. But every sound outside, every whisper of footsteps carried a weight of threat. Then came the soft scrape of metal. He turned his head. A small vent in the corner shifted open. Out of the darkness, two glowing eyes peeked through. Daniel froze. The eyes blinked, and then a small voice whispered, It's me. His chest tightened. It was the girl. She crawled halfway through the vent, her small hands gripping the edge. I had to see you, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. You shouldn't be here. If they catch you, I don't care, she said quickly, her voice trembling. You saved me. I won't let them take you. Daniel knelt, meeting her eyes. Listen, you must stay safe. Don't risk yourself for me. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice grew steady. They say humans are monsters, but you were the only one who helped me. I know the truth. I will find a way. Before Daniel could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. The girl gasped and pulled back into the vent. Wait, Daniel whispered, but she was already gone, leaving only the faint clang of metal behind. The guard patrol passed, their heavy boots shaking the floor. Daniel backed away, hiding his face in shadow until the sounds faded. When silence returned, he let out a long breath. He was not alone anymore. Somewhere out there, that child was planning something dangerous, and deep inside, Daniel felt both fear and hope. Fear, because a young girl could never fight an empire. Hope, because she was the only one who believed in him. Daniel closed his eyes and whispered to the dark, If she's brave enough to fight for me, then I must survive to fight for her. The prison walls hummed again, cold and endless, but inside Daniel a fire began to grow. The city of Zarian glittered under the twin suns, but to the young alien girl, the lights no longer felt bright. Every corner of the city reminded her of the man taken away in chains. His burned hands, his calm eyes, his voice telling her to run she could not forget. Her name was Lyra. She had lived her whole life under the laws of chains, the rules whispered into every child's ear. Never trust a human. Never help a human. Never believe a human. To her, those words had always been nothing more than stories. Warnings meant to keep children obedient. But when the human had saved her, when Daniel had risked his life to tear the net apart, those stories shattered. He was no monster. He was the only one who cared. Lyra walked quickly through the streets, her hood pulled low to hide her face. The city bustled as always. Merchants selling glowing crystals, guards patrolling with steel boots, towers humming with endless power. But to her the city looked like a cage. Its beauty was built on fear. Its order was built on silence. She had made her decision. She would free him. But she was only a child. She had no strength, no weapon, no allies. What she had was curiosity, and curiosity could open doors where weapons could not. That night, when the city grew quiet, Lyra crept into the Grand Archives. It was forbidden for children to enter, but she knew the old passages well. Her father had worked here once as a record keeper. She remembered the hidden cracks in the walls, the narrow gaps behind the glowing shelves. The archives smelled of dust and old metal. Tall pillars of crystal held endless records, scrolls, tablets, and living memory cubes that glowed faintly in the dark. Lyra's heart pounded. If she was caught, the punishment would be harsh. But Daniel's face burned in her mind. She whispered to herself, "He saved me. Now I must save him." Her small fingers traced the shelves until she found what she needed, a cube marked with the oldest symbol, the spiral of chains. She pulled it free. It was heavy, warm, alive with stored memory. Carefully, she placed it in the reader. Light burst before her eyes. Voices from the past spoke in low tones. Images filled the air, ships burning in the sky, humans fighting beside aliens, chains breaking, rulers screaming. Lyra gasped. The records told a story she had never heard in school. Long ago, humans had not been weak. They had been fighters. When the rulers of Zerion enslaved other species, humans rose against them. They broke the chains, freed prisoners, and spread rebellion. The galaxy had nearly turned against the rulers completely, but the rulers struck back with lies. They called humans dangerous, uncontrollable, too wild to be trusted. They rewrote history. They built the law of chains, teaching every new generation that humans were monsters. Lyra's hands shook. The truth was heavy. Daniel had done what humans always did, fight against cruelty. But instead of being honored, he was condemned. Tears welled in her eyes, but behind them grew something stronger. Anger. They fear him, she whispered to herself. They fear what he stands for. A sudden sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Quickly, she shut down the cube and pressed herself into the shadows. A pair of guards walked past, their armor clinking. Their voices low. "Tomorrow, the human is to be judged," one said. "The punishment will be death," the other replied. Lyra bit her lip to keep from crying out. Death? They wanted to kill him for saving. Her small fists clenched. No, she would not allow it. When the guards vanished, she slipped out of the archives, her heart pounding harder than ever. She ran through the alleys until she reached her hidden corner near the prison wall. She looked up at the high towers glowing with blue energy and whispered, "I will find a way." That night she could not sleep. She stared at the stars, her mind racing. She thought of Daniel sitting alone in his cell. She thought of the cold eyes of the elder, Keeper Malith. She thought of the lies carved into every law. Finally, she stood. Her path was clear. She would break the rules. She would break every rule if that was what it took. Lyra knew she could not fight the guards with strength, but she could move unseen. She could steal what others ignored. She could crawl through the vents, slip through cracks, and gather secrets. Her plan began with one simple step. She would steal an ID crystal from a guard. With it, she could open doors. With it, she could reach him. As dawn rose over the city, painting the towers gold, Lyra pulled her hood over her head. Her eyes no longer held fear. They held fire. The decision was made. She would save the human, even if the whole city turned against her. The city of Zerion never truly slept. Even at night, the towers pulsed with blue energy, and the patrol drones hummed like insects across the skies. But in the shadows below, where the light of the twin suns could not reach, Lyra moved quietly, her hood low and her steps soft. She was no warrior. She was no thief, but tonight she had chosen to become both. Her heart pounded as she crouched behind a broken wall near the outer barracks of the city guards. Torches of electric fire burned at the entrances, and armored soldiers walked in pairs, their weapons humming with steady power. She clutched the small stone in her hand, rubbing it for courage. It was the only thing she owned from her mother, who had once whispered to her, "There will be a time when rules must be broken." When that day comes, do not be afraid. That day had come. Lyra's plan was simple but dangerous. She needed an ID crystal, those glowing shards that the guards carried. With it, she could pass locked doors, deactivate barriers, maybe even reach Daniel's cell. Without it, she had no hope. She waited. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, a guard separated from the rest, walking alone toward the far side of the barracks. His armor was heavy, and his steps echoed across the stones. Lyra's small form melted into the shadows, her breath slow and quiet. As the guard stopped to check a scanner near the wall, Lyra crept closer. Her fingers trembled, but her mind stayed sharp. She reached out, slipping her hand into the folds of his belt. The ID crystal was warm, pulsing with a faint blue light. She held her breath, gently pulling it free. Then the guard turned. Lyra froze. The crystal glowed faintly in her hand. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows. For a heartbeat, she thought the world would end. But at that very moment, another guard called out from the gate. The soldier turned away, answering the call. Lyra darted back into the darkness, her chest pounding like a drum. She ran through the narrow alleys until the barracks disappeared behind her. When she finally stopped, she pressed her back against the wall and opened her palm. The crystal shone like a captured star. She had done it, but victory brought no relief. It only made her next task heavier. She had crossed the line. She had broken the rules. And once broken, there was no return. Inside the prison, Daniel sat on the edge of his steel bed. His mind was restless, caught between memories of Earth and the strange cruelty of this world. He thought of Lyra, her wide eyes, her trembling voice in the vent. He hoped she was safe. The sound of footsteps drew his attention. A guard walked past his cell, the glow of an ID crystal bouncing off the walls. The sight reminded Daniel of the chains on his wrists, the hopelessness of escape. He clenched his fists, forcing himself not to give in to despair. Then, without warning, the wall panel near his cell flickered. For a moment, the glowing lines across the surface dimmed. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Something had changed. Lyra crouched inside a vent above the prison control room, her hands wrapped tightly around the stolen crystal. Below her, the guards sat at their glowing consoles, unaware of the child above their heads. She took a deep breath, pressed the crystal into the reader she had found, and whispered a prayer. The machines flickered. One of the guards frowned at his screen. Strange. The locks are cycling. Probably just a surge, another replied, too tired to care. Lyra waited until their attention drifted back to their drinks. Then she slid deeper into the vent, the crystal still glowing in her hand. She knew she couldn't free Daniel tonight, not yet. But she could learn. She could test the system, and she did. Corridor by corridor, she used the crystal to open, close, and reset small doors, mapping the prison in her mind. Every flicker of the lights was a risk, every breath a danger. But the thought of Daniel sitting in chains pushed her forward. When she finally slipped back into the night, her legs shaking from fear and exhaustion, she knew more than before. She knew which halls were guarded, which doors were locked, and which ones led deeper into the prison's heart. But she also knew something else. She had seen files glowing on one of the consoles, files marked with Daniel's name. She had not been able to open them, but she had seen the symbol, the spiral of chains. Her heart sank. That symbol was not for prisoners. It was for execution. Back in her hidden corner, Lyra stared at the stars. The stolen crystal lay in her lap, glowing softly like a heartbeat. Tomorrow Daniel would be judged. The day after he would die. She tightened her fists. No, she whispered. I won't let it happen. Even if I must stand against the whole city, I will break every chain. The night wind carried her words away, but her resolve remained. Lyra, a small alien girl, had become something greater. She had become a rule breaker, and tomorrow she would become a liberator. The city of Zarion woke under the pale light of dawn. The twin suns had not yet risen high, and the streets glowed with the first touch of gold. Merchants prepared their stalls, Guards began their shifts, and the prison stood like a silent beast at the edge of the city, its towers black against the sky. Inside those towers, Daniel sat chained to the steel bed. His body was tired, but his mind was restless. He had dreamed of Earth again, oceans stretching far, the smell of rain, the sound of laughter. But the dream ended in fire with the echo of a judge's voice. The law of chains cannot be broken. The heavy door outside his cell opened. A guard entered, dropping a tray of gray food blocks onto the floor. Daniel barely touched them. Instead, he studied the guard's movements, every detail, every weakness. He knew Lyra was out there somewhere. He had felt the prison lights flicker the night before. Someone was testing the system. Someone was trying to reach him, and Daniel already knew who. Far above, hidden in a narrow vent, Lyra pressed the stolen ID crystal into a small device she had built from scraps. Her hands shook, but her mind stayed sharp. She had spent the entire night memorizing the prison layout. She knew where Daniel was kept. She knew which corridors were blocked, and she knew time was running out. The judgment was scheduled for tonight. By morning, Daniel would be dead. She whispered to herself, "Not if I get to him first." Taking a deep breath, she pressed the crystal into the control lock. The vent around her lit up, glowing blue. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a faint hum, one of the prison doors clicked open. Daniel heard it. The soft hiss of his cell door. He stood slowly, not daring to believe. The glowing chains around his wrists flickered, then dissolved into sparks. He stepped forward. The door slid open and the corridor stretched out before him. Empty, silent. A voice whispered through the vent above him. "Go." Daniel looked up and saw a flash of familiar eyes, Lyra's eyes, before she disappeared into the shadows. He moved quickly, his bare feet silent on the cold floor. Every corner felt like a trap, every echo a warning, but the doors kept opening as he approached. Someone was guiding him, unlocking the path. The alarm came sooner than expected. A sharp siren wailed across the prison. Red lights bathed the halls. Guards shouted orders, their heavy boots pounding the ground. Lyra bit her lip. She had moved too fast. The system had detected her override. Now the entire prison was awake. Still, she kept moving, crawling through vents, opening doors in Daniel's path. Daniel broke into a run. 2 guards appeared at the end of the hall. With no weapon in his hands, he grabbed a broken chain from the floor and swung it like a whip. The metal struck hard, knocking one guard down. The second lunged, but Daniel caught him by the arm, twisting and slamming him against the wall. The man fell unconscious. Daniel picked up a weapon from the fallen guard, a short staff humming with blue energy. He turned it in his hands, testing its weight. It was alien, but it would do. Lyra's heart raced. She had never seen battle, but through the vents she watched Daniel fight. He moved with strength and speed she had never thought a human could have. Every strike was precise, every movement born from survival. For a moment she felt hope. Then she saw the barrier. At the end of the next corridor, a massive gate glowed with bright energy. Beyond it lay the exit tunnels, but the gate was heavily guarded. An entire squad of soldiers waiting, weapons raised. Lyra's stomach twisted. Daniel could not fight them all. Not alone. She closed her eyes, searching for another path. There was one, an old drainage tunnel that ran beneath the prison. But opening it would require shutting down the main power grid, and that would mean exposing herself completely. Her hands trembled on the crystal. If she triggered the shutdown, every guard would know someone was inside the system. They would come for her, but if she didn't, Daniel would die. She pressed the crystal into the lock. "For him," she whispered. Suddenly the lights across the prison flickered and died. The energy gates collapsed in showers of sparks. Darkness swallowed the corridors. The guards shouted in confusion. Daniel saw his chance. With a roar, he charged forward. His stolen staff struck like lightning, knocking aside soldiers before they could regroup. In the chaos of darkness, their numbers no longer mattered. Daniel broke through, his body burning with determination. Behind him, the alarms rose to a deafening pitch. He reached the exit tunnel, the gate gone, the path open. But before he could step through, the sound of marching boots filled the air. An army waited beyond. Daniel gripped the staff tighter, his breath heavy, his muscles aching. He knew he could not fight them all. But he would not stop. Above, Lyra watched from the vents, her eyes wide with fear and determination. She had brought him this far, but the battle ahead was his to face for the first time. Daniel and Lyra were truly together in this fight. 2 lives against an empire, and the city of Zarian was about to learn what it meant to challenge a human. The tunnel stretched wide, filled with red shadows from the emergency lights. At the far end, a wall of armored soldiers blocked the exit. Their weapons glowed blue, humming with deadly energy. Behind them, the city of Zarian waited, silent and cold. Daniel stood alone in the middle of the corridor, his body covered in sweat, burns, and bruises. In his hands, he gripped the stolen energy staff. The chain he had carried earlier now hung at his side, broken but still useful. His chest rose and fell with steady breath. He knew what this was. A last stand. Above him, hidden in the vents, Lyra's eyes filled with fear. She wanted to scream for him to stop, to run, but she knew there was no running. The soldiers would never allow it. If he turned back, he would only fall into another trap. Daniel planted his feet firmly on the ground. His voice rang out, echoing through the tunnel. "I didn't come here to fight your war," he said. "I only saved a child." The captain of the guard stepped forward. His armor gleamed like liquid silver, and his helmet carried the mark of the spiral of chains. His voice was sharp as steel. "You broke our oldest law," he declared. "You reminded this city of the past we buried. For that you will die here." The soldiers raised their weapons as one. The air vibrated with power. Lyra bit her lip until it bled. She couldn't watch him die. She pressed the stolen crystal into the nearest lock, forcing the vents to open wider. She whispered, "Please fight, but survive." The first shot fired. Blue energy crackled through the tunnel. Daniel rolled aside, the beam scorching the wall where he had stood. He leapt forward, swinging the staff with both hands. The weapon struck the nearest soldier, sending sparks flying as the armor cracked. Another guard rushed him. Daniel spun, the chain whipping out, wrapping around the soldier's arm. With a hard pull, he dragged the man forward and slammed the staff against his chest plate. The soldier collapsed, but more came. Dozens of them. Blades, staves, and rifles glowed in the dark. Daniel fought like a storm. Every strike was fueled by fire, every movement born of survival. He moved faster than they expected, stronger than they believed possible. For every blow he took, he gave back too. Blood trickled down his face, but his eyes burned with something greater than pain. Above, Lyra gasped as she saw the soldiers hesitate. For the first time, they looked uncertain. "He's human," one soldier muttered. "They said humans were weak." "He fights like 10 of us," another whispered. Fear spread like a shadow through their ranks. But the captain did not fear. He raised his blade, glowing brighter than the rest, and charged forward. His strikes were sharp, practiced, deadly. Daniel blocked 1, 2, but the third cut across his arm. Pain seared, and his grip faltered. The captain pressed harder, his voice full of hatred. "You are a curse to this galaxy. You infect others with rebellion. That is why we buried your kind in chains." Daniel roared back, slamming the staff against the captain's blade. Sparks exploded. "You fear us," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the blood on his lips. "Not because we're dangerous, but because we remind you of freedom." The words struck deeper than the staff. Even the soldiers froze at them. The captain growled and swung again, but Daniel caught the blade in the chain and yanked. With one final strike, he smashed the staff against the captain's chest. The silver armor shattered and the man fell hard to the ground. Silence filled the tunnel. The soldiers stared. None moved. High above, Lyra pulled open a console. She had hacked deeper now, using the crystal and her courage. What she saw made her breath stop. Files opened, streams of history flooding the screen. She saw images of humans long ago, not slaves, not monsters, but leaders of rebellions, allies to the weak, defenders of freedom. She saw how the rulers of Zarian rewrote every page, turning heroes into demons, turning truth into lies. Her hands shook. Tears filled her eyes. "They lied to us all," she whispered. "Humans weren't our enemy. They were the only ones who fought for us." She looked down through the vent at Daniel, standing among fallen soldiers, his chest rising and falling, his eyes bright even in exhaustion. He was living proof of the truth, and she knew now why the rulers feared him. Why they feared all humans, not because humans were dangerous, but because humans gave hope. The soldiers stepped back slowly. Their weapons lowered, uncertainty in their eyes. None wanted to step forward again. The captain lay broken at their feet, groaning in defeat. Daniel raised his staff high, though his body trembled. His voice echoed once more. "You can chain a man," he said, "but you cannot chain courage, and you cannot chain the truth forever." Lyra's heart swelled with fire. She knew at that moment the galaxy would never look the same again. But far beyond the prison walls, hidden deep in the towers of Zerion, the true rulers watched. Their cold eyes glowed as warships stirred in their docks. The fight in the tunnel was only the beginning. The tunnel was silent except for the hum of failing lights and the heavy breaths of Daniel. Around him, the soldiers stood frozen, their weapons lowered, their eyes shifting between fear and doubt. The captain lay broken on the ground, his silver armor cracked like shattered glass. Daniel's staff trembled in his hands, but his voice was steady. "You call this order?" he said. "You call this justice? A man is chained for saving a child. A truth is buried because you are afraid of it. No, this is not order. This is fear wearing armor." The words cut deeper than any blade. Some soldiers looked down, ashamed. Others glanced at each other, uncertain. For the first time in years, the silence of obedience began to break. Above, hidden in the vents, Lyra felt her heart swell. His voice carried fire, and that fire spread. She whispered to herself, "This is why they fear him. This is why they fear humans." But her hope was cut short. A deep rumble shook the ground. From beyond the tunnel came the roar of engines. War machines. Heavy steps echoed like thunder. The true force of the rulers was arriving. Daniel straightened, gripping his staff tighter. His body ached, his wounds burned, but he planted his feet. If more soldiers came, he would fight them too. Then, a voice whispered above him. "This way!" A vent cover slid open and Lyra dropped down, landing beside him. Her small hands reached out, pulling at his arm. "We have to go, now." Daniel looked at her, then at the army gathering beyond the tunnel. He gave a small nod. "Lead the way." They ran through narrow passages, guided by Lyra's memory of the prison schematics. She had memorized every corridor, every hidden path. Behind them, alarms screamed. Ahead, the air grew cooler, fresher. Finally, they reached an old drainage tunnel. The air smelled of damp stone and rust. But above them, the first light of dawn filtered through a cracked grate. Freedom lay beyond. Lyra pressed the stolen crystal into the lock. The grate groaned, then opened. Sunlight spilled into the tunnel. Daniel climbed first, then reached back to help her up. When they emerged, the world seemed wider, brighter, alive with the sound of distant city bells. The twin suns rose slowly, painting the sky with gold and red. For the first time since his capture, Daniel breathed free air. Lyra stood beside him, her hood falling back, her face lit by the morning light. She smiled faintly, but her voice trembled. "We're not safe yet." "They'll come," Daniel nodded. "They always come, but we'll be ready." They moved quickly through the outskirts of the city. The streets were quieter here, filled with abandoned structures and overgrown paths. The people who saw them only watched in silence, some with fear, others with curiosity. One old alien woman whispered as they passed, "A human." Another voice answered, "No, a savior." Daniel heard the whispers but said nothing. He kept walking, every step heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Finally, they reached a small clearing outside the city walls. From there, the land stretched into open plains dotted with ruins of ancient towers. Daniel stopped, gazing at the horizon. Lyra turned to him, her eyes wide and bright. "What now?" Daniel looked down at her. "Now we run. We survive. And when the time comes, we fight again." Her hands clenched into fists. "I'll stand with you. I don't care what the laws say. I know the truth now." For a moment, silence passed between them. Then Daniel placed a burned, scarred hand gently on her shoulder. "You're braver than most grown men I've known," he said softly. "Never lose that." But far above, in the sky beyond the city, shadows stirred. Massive warships lifted from the docks, their engines roaring like storms. Their dark hulls blocked the rising suns, casting long shadows across the plains. The rulers had awakened. They had seen the cracks in their order, and they would not allow the truth to spread. Lyra looked up at the sky, her breath catching. "They're coming." Daniel followed her gaze. His jaw tightened, but there was no fear in his eyes, only resolve. "Then let them come," he said. "They've spent centuries chaining the truth. But chains always break." The warships loomed closer, their lights flashing like distant lightning. The ground trembled under their power. Daniel and Lyra stood side by side on the plains, two small figures against an empire. One a scarred human who refused to bow. the other a young girl who had broken every rule to set him free. Together, they looked at the rising storm. This was not the end, it was the beginning.